Insurance policies, scandals, and a tangled web of lies. Oh my, welcome to one of the messiest true crime tales you'll hear all week. Picture this: a seemingly perfect life, a picturesque marriage, and then bam! It all starts to crumble like an overbaked cookie. So, what really went down on that fateful night? Let's rewind this chaotic timeline all the way back to where it began. June 19th, 1979. That's the day Janet Abaroa was born in Virginia as the 7th of 10 children. Yeah, you heard that right. 7 out of 10. Her family was as devoutly Mormon as they come, which meant discipline, faith, and high expectations were practically baked into her DNA. Janet wasn't just your average kid, though. She was a freaking superstar. Intelligent, athletic, and determined to stand out in every way possible. She crushed it in sports like soccer, basketball, and swimming, making her the definition of a small-town overachiever. By 1988, her hard work had paid off in spades. Janet earned herself a spot on the first-ever women's soccer team at South Virginia University. And that's where things started to get interesting, because this is where she met him. Enter Raven Abaroa, the dude who was charming, athletic, and apparently the full package, or so he wanted everyone to think. Raven played on the men's soccer team and swooped in with all the charisma of a guy who knows his way around a locker room pep talk. Janet and Raven's relationship escalated faster than your drunk uncle at a wedding. By August 2000, Janet, just 20 years old, married Raven in a traditional Mormon ceremony. The young couple was all smiles as they moved to Durham, North Carolina for fresh job opportunities at Eurosport, a sports company. From the outside looking in, they were the ultimate couple goals. But here's the kicker: their seemingly perfect life, yeah, that was a total mirage. Soon enough, the cracks in their marriage started to show. Financial stress, trust issues, and, did I mention infidelity? Yep, Raven wasn't exactly playing by the rules. In 2003, he dropped a bombshell. He'd been having multiple affairs. Not just that, one of those affairs involved a minor. Yikes. Janet's trust was shattered into a million pieces, and their marriage, which was already a little wobbly, was on life support. Raven eventually packed his bags and left, leaving Janet to pick up the emotional pieces all by herself. Janet, and just when you think this story couldn't get any more complicated, 2005 rolls around with another plot twist. Janet found out she was pregnant with their second child. Yep, baby number 2 was on the way, and now Janet was caught in the ultimate emotional tug-of-war. Should she stick with her marriage and give Raven another chance, or cut her losses and move on? As if that weren't enough drama, Raven managed to make things even worse, because of course he did. In December 2004, he got arrested for shoplifting at the sporting goods store where both he and Janet worked. Turns out this guy wasn't just bad at being faithful, he wasn't great at following the law either. During the investigation, more skeletons started falling out of Raven's metaphorical closet. And folks, this was just the beginning of their spiraling. So stick around, because what happened next was both shocking and heartbreaking. And it's proof that sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. Engaged in a scheme to embezzle goods worth over $9,000 from the store, Raven operated his embezzlement scheme methodically. He ordered athletic shoes and merch arranged for their delivery to their home address after receiving the merchandise. He sold the shoes online under the alias Footballer Guy. This approach allowed him to profit from stolen goods while maintaining an appearance of legitimacy. The embezzlement came to light when the supplier contacted the sporting goods store regarding unpaid merchandise. A verification of delivery address quickly LED investigators to Raven, resulting in his prompt dismissal from the store in subsequent legal action. Although Janet was not involved in the thefts, she faced significant shame and humiliation due to her husband's actions, leading her to leave her job as well. Raven managed to avoid prison time for his embezzlement. Instead, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution of nearly $10,000. The financial strain from Raven's embezzlement and subsequent legal troubles added immense pressure on the young family, who were already struggling to make ends meet. They had received support from their landlord and church community, but Raven's actions exacerbated their dire financial situation as tensions escalated. Raven took out a life insurance policy on Janet worth $500,000, which raised suspicions about his intentions. This decision seemed particularly questionable given their precarious financial situation and the fact that he had not previously held such policies. Janet increasingly expressed ESS concerns about Raven's aggressive behavior towards her friends, fearing his unpredictable outbursts of anger. These factors, infidelity, financial instability, and escalating tensions, set the stage for the tragedy that was about to unfold. The combination of personal and financial crises created an environment ripe for conflict, ultimately leading to the catastrophic events of April 26, 2016. On April 26, 2005, the day began like any other for Janet Abaroa. She picked up her 6-month-old son, Caden, from daycare and returned home. The couple had plans to meet with a member of their church community later that evening. As the day progressed, tensions within the household were palpable, stemming from ongoing marital issues. Around 8:30 p.m., Raven Abaroa prepared to leave for a soccer match in Morrisville. In an unusual move, he locked their 2 dogs in the shed before departing. This behavior was out of character, as the dogs typically slept indoors, and provided Jan with a sense of security. When questioned later, this action raised suspicions among investigators. Raven claimed that when he left the house, Janet was getting ready for bed. However, around 10 CP, he returned home to find her dead on the floor in an unnatural position. Initially, he reported to the 911 dispatcher that she had suffered a gunshot wound. However, it was later determined that she had been stabbed multiple times. When investigators arrived at the Abaroa residence on April 6, 2005, they found Janet Abaroa in a kneeling position on the floor of their bedroom. The scene was grim, with evidence indicating that she had been brutally attacked. An autopsy later confirmed that Janet had suffered multiple stab wounds. Specifically, she had 3 deep stab wounds on her left arm, which was identified as a defensive wound, and 2 fatal stab wounds to her chest and neck. The fatal stab wound severed an artery and penetrated her lung, leading to her death. The coroner also confirmed that Janet was pregnant at the time of her murder, a fact known only to a few of her closest friends. There were no signs of a struggle or a forced entry at the crime scene, and valuables remained untouched. Only Raven's laptop and several kitchen knives were missing from the house. Janet's wedding ring and other jewelry were found untouched on her vanity, suggesting that the victim likely knew her as assailant or willingly let them into her home. Crucial evidence collected at the crime scene included a bloody shoe print and a fingerprint that did not match Raven's. These findings raised significant questions about Raven's claims and the circumstances surrounding Janet's death. Raven EO's frantic call reporting that his wife Janet was not breathing came under scrutiny almost immediately. During the call, he initially claimed that she had suffered gunshot wounds. When emergency responders arrived at the Abaroa residence, they found Janet dead from multiple stab wounds, directly contradicting Raven's assertion of a shooting. This discrepancy raised immediate suspicions among investigators regarding the accuracy of Death's claims. The inconsistencies did not end there. Initially, Raven was cooperative with investigators, however. As the investigation progressed, he informed Janet's family that she had committed suicide. This claim was met with skepticism by her family, who knew Janet's character and strong religious beliefs against taking her own life. Raven provided conflicting statements to law enforcement, too. He initially stated that he found Janet already dead, but later claimed she was alive and had asked him why it hurt so much. Yet, during his call with the 911 dispatcher, he did not ask for help for Janet, but rather informed them that she had been shot. These inconsistencies in his narrative further fueled suspicion about his involvement in Janet's murder. Shortly after Janet's death, Raven moved to Utah with their son Caden. His decision to leave North Carolina raised eyebrows among investigators. He attempted to claim the life insurance payout for Janet even before her funeral, which added to the growing concerns regarding his motives during the investigation. Investigators discovered that Raven had backed up all data from his laptop to CDs just one day before the murder on the 25th of April, 2005. This timing was particularly suspicious and raised questions about his intentions leading up to Janet's death. While sorting through belongings following the murder, Janet's sister found these discs containing vital information backed up just before the incident. The discovery of this evidence suggested potential premeditation on Raven's part and contributed to the Moon case against him in 2008. Raven married Vanessa Pond, a single mother whose daughter attended the same daycare as his son Caden initially. Vanessa was hesitant about entering a relationship with Raven, but he persistently pursued her, charming her with his attention and care for her child. He presented himself as a devoted father and partner, which helped him gain Vanessa's trust. However, troubling patterns soon emerged that mirrored those seen in his first marriage to Janet. Reports indicated that Raven exhibited abusive behaviors similar to those he had displayed during his marriage to Janet. Allegations of controlling behavior and emotional manipulation surfaced, raising alarms among those close to Vanessa, friends and family members. Noted that Vanessa began to withdraw from her support network and became increasingly isolated as Raven exerted control over her life. Ultimately, Vanessa's marriage to Raven ended due to these allegations of abuse. This cycle of behavior highlighted a disturbing pattern that seemed to follow Raven into his new relationships, suggesting unresolved issues from his past and an inability to maintain healthy partnerships. In the months following Janet Eo's murder, the investigation faced significant challenges despite the initial suspicion surrounding her husband, Raven Abaroa. There was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. Investigators found a bloody shoe print, a fingerprint at the crime scene, but neither matched Raven's. This lack of concrete evidence hindered the prosecution's ability to build a strong case against him. But additionally, Raven's alibi for the night of the murder was confirmed by multiple witnesses who saw him at a soccer match in Morrisville. While this alibi initially appeared to exonerate him, it also complicated the investigation, as detectives struggled to reconcile his presence at the game with the timeline of Janet's death. As time passed and leads dwindled, the case went cold until Detective Charles Soule took over in late 2018. Common was never identified in a neighborhood scene nor a Florida missing. Soule was determined to re-examine all aspects of the investigation with fresh eyes. He meticulously reviewed the evidence collected during the initial inquiry and began focusing on inconsistencies in Raven's statements. And behavior detective Soule also began questioning whether Janet had been wearing her contact lenses at the time of her death. He theorized that if she was prepared for bed but still had her contacts in, it would contradict Raven's narrative that she was murdered shortly after he left for soccer practice. To investigate this theory further, Soule decided that exhuming Janet's body might provide crucial evidence. The exam was necessary to determine if she had been indeed wearing her contact lenses when she died, which provided a clear timeline of events leading up to her murder in early 2010. Janet's body was exhumed from a cemetery in Pennsylvania. During the examination, investigators confirmed that she had died with her contact lenses still in her eyes. This finding suggested that she had not been preparing for bed, as Raven claimed, but rather was likely attacked shortly after he left for the soccer match. The results of this exam were significant. They not only contradicted Raven's timeline, but also indicated potential premeditation on his part. The presence of her contact lenses suggests that Janet was caught off guard, raising further questions about Raven's involvement in her murder as Detective Soule pieced together these elements. Raven's inconsistent statements, his suspicious behavior after Janet's death, and now. The evidence from the exam, all signs pointed towards his culpability. The inconsistencies in Raven's narrative became increasingly difficult to ignore, with mounting evidence suggesting foul play and a growing belief that Raven had orchestrated his wife's murder. Authorities prepared to take decisive action. The stage was set for an arrest that would finally bring justice for Janet Abaroa on February 1st, 2010. Raven Abaroa was arrested in Idaho on charges of first-degree murder in connection with the death of his wife, Janet Abaroa. This arrest followed lengthy investigation that revealed inconsistencies in his statements and suspicious behavior surrounding the circumstances of Janet's murder. The investigation raised significant doubts about Raven's credibility and involvement in the crime, ultimately leading law enforcement to take decisive action against him. In April 2013, the highly anticipated trial of Raven Abaroa commenced, lasting for 5 weeks. The trial attracted significant media attention due to the nature of the crime and the complexity surrounding the case. The prosecution presented a robust case built primarily on circumstantial evidence. They called over 80 witnesses to testify, including friends and family members, who provided insights into Raven's violent behavior and manipulative tendencies. Key testimonies included accounts from women who had experienced Raven's abusive behavior firsthand. These witnesses described instances of emotional manipulation and aggression, painting a picture of a man capable of committing such a heinous act. One notable witness was Janet's close friend, who testified about Janet's fears regarding Raven's unpredictable outbursts. And before the breakup, he said, "I'd find a little bracelet for my wrist and I would convince myself it was going to save me." Her concerns for her safety. This testimony aimed to establish a motive rooted in Raven's abusive behavior and the deteriorating state of their marriage. The prosecution also highlighted critical evidence from the crime scene, indicating the absence of forced entry, which suggested that Janet likely knew her as assailant. They argued that Raven's actions following Janet's murder, such as moving to Utah with their son Caden and attempting to claim a life, insurance payouts were indicative of guilt. In contrast, the defense focused on the lack of direct evidence linking Raven to the murder. They argue that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and emotional testimonies rather than concrete proof. The defense highlighted that there were no fingerprints or shoe prints matching Raven found at the crime scene, undermining the prosecution's claims. Additionally, they emphasized Raven's confirmed alibi. Multiple witnesses corroborated his presence at a soccer match during the time of Janet's murder. This alibi was crucial for the defense, as it suggested that he could not have been at home when the crime occurred. The defense also pointed out inconsistencies in witness testimonies and questioned the reliability of those who claimed to have seen or heard anything suspicious on the night of the murder. By focusing on these gaps and evidence, they aim to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. By May 2013, after 5 long weeks of testimony and deliberation, the trial concluded with a hung jury. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, with 11 jurors voting guilty while 1 maintained innocence. This deadlock resulted in a mistrial, leaving both sides frustrated and uncertain about what would happen next. The outcome highlighted the complexities of the case despite compelling circumstantial evidence presented by the prosecution. The lack of direct evidence linking Raven to Janet's murder ultimately prevented a conviction. The mistrial also pointed towards deeply divided opinions regarding Raven's guilt or innocence, setting the stage for further legal proceedings in what would become a protracted battle for justice. As discussions about a potential retrial began, both sides braced for what lay ahead, knowing that this was far from over. The trial had raised more questions than answers, leaving Janet's family seeking closure and justice for their loved one's tragic death. Following the mistrial in 2013, discussions about a potential plea deal began between the defense as both sides sought to evaluate new evidence that had emerged during the investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence that the prosecution felt might sway the jury in the retrial was the report of Janet Abo's body aimation conducted in July 2010. I am among all the inconsistencies Raven had put forward. The biggest one was related to Janet's contact lenses. His claim that Janet was getting ready to go to bed was proven wrong by the exhumation report when it was confirmed that there were still fragments of contact lenses in her eyes. So, as per Detective Soul's theory, if she had not removed the lenses, she was not yet ready for bed. And if she was not ready for bed, it meant she was attacked and killed shortly after Raven left for his soccer match. Hence, the whole scenario would fall onto Raven, that maybe it was Raven who pretended to go out for a football match and locked up the dog so there wouldn't be any protection for Janet. He then came back inside the house, and since Janet knew it was him, there were no signs of forced entry or call for help, which she would have done in the case of an intruder. He then committed the murder and left for the football match, which confirmed his alibi. Upon his return, he would make a 911 call where he described his wife as dead, but later changed his stance and said that she was alive upon his arrival. Although all of this was speculative evidence based on theory, and there was no match found of the bloody footprint or the fingerprint of the crime scene, it was looking likely that if another trial were to take place, the jury would be swayed towards declaring him guilty of first-degree murder. On March 12th, 2014, Raven Abaroa entered an Alfred plea for voluntary manslaughter in connection with the death of his wife, Janet Abaroa. This plea allowed him to acknowledge that sufficient evidence existed for a conviction without admitting guilt. The decision to accept this plea deal came after extensive discussions between the prosecution and defense. Following the mistrial in 2013, the terms of the Alford police stipulated that Raven would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which is a lesser charge than first-degree murder. This charge typically indicates that while the defendant did not intend to kill, there was a significant degree of recklessness or negligence involved in their actions that led to someone's death. By accepting this plea, Raven effectively acknowledged that the evidence against him was strong enough to likely result in a conviction if the case went to trial again. The acceptance of the Alfred plea was influenced by several factors after the mistrial. Both sides recognized the challenge of pursuing another trial. The prosecution needed to ensure a conviction without risking another hung jury, while the defense sought to mitigate potential sentencing outcomes for Raven as part of the plea agreement. Raven was sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison and received credit for time served, approximately 4 years, meaning he would serve a reduced sentence. The sentencing reflected the seriousness of Janet's death while also considering Raven's acceptance of responsibility. Through the plea, accepting the voluntary manslaughter charge allowed Raven to avoid a more severe sentence associated with first-degree murder, which carries harsher penalties and reflects premeditated intent. By pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter, he could maintain this innocence publicly while acknowledging that his actions contributed to Janet's death. This strategic move likely aimed to reduce public scrutiny and provide some measure of closure for both families involved. Ultimately, this plea agreement marked a pivotal moment in the case, closing one chapter while leaving lingering questions about justice for Janet Abaroa and the implications of domestic violence within relationships, courtroom drama, and just a sprinkle of legal chaos. This story has it all. You think you know how messy love can get? Think again. This case isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a full-blown Shakespearean tragedy, complete with betrayal, legal loopholes, and unanswered questions that will have you screaming at your screen. So, let's dive into the wild ride that is the case of Janet Abaroa and her husband Raven. First, let's set the stage. Christmas Day 2017. While most people are unwrapping gifts and sipping eggnog, Raven Abaroa is walking out of prison after serving time for his Alford plea to voluntary manslaughter in connection with his wife Janet's death. Now, if you're not familiar with an Alford plea, it's basically saying, yeah, I didn't do it, but you've got enough evidence to convict me, so I'll just take the deal. It's like a weird middle ground where guilt isn't technically admitted, but the consequences are still real. Wild, right? So, what did Raven do after he got out? Did he reflect, take responsibility, and strive to honor his wife's memory? Nope. He packed up, moved back to Utah, and started over, as if his life hadn't just been the subject of one of the most perplexing murder cases in recent history. But let's rewind, because the road to that Alford plea wasn't exactly a smooth one. Janet's tragic death in 2005 left a crater in the lives of her family. And let me tell you, they weren't buying Raven's story, not for a second. The inconsistencies in his alibi, his suspicious behavior after her death, trying to cash in on Janet's life insurance before her funeral, and his history of infidelity, anger issues, and alleged abuse had people side-eyeing him harder than a bad Christmas sweater. Oh, and did I mention this guy had the audacity to try to spin the whole thing as a suicide? Yeah, because nothing says grieving husband like pointing fingers at your deceased spouse while planning to cash out on her life insurance. But here's the kicker. No direct evidence ever tied Raven to Janet's murder. None. Nada. Zilch. It was all circumstantial. And as frustrating as that is, the justice system needs more than suspicion to lock someone away for life. Janet's family, understandably, was devastated by the outcome. They felt the justice system failed their daughter, sister, and friend. But they didn't let that stop them from fighting for something bigger. Janet's case became a turning point for raising awareness about domestic violence and the critical importance of thorough investigations. Her story is now used in training programs for law enforcement, teaching officers how to better recognize the signs of abuse and respond to potential domestic violence cases. Her legacy is saving lives, even though she wasn't able to save her own. Now, here's where things get even juicier. Raven's behavior didn't exactly scream wrongly accused innocent man. The guy's pattern of explosive anger and controlling tendencies reared its ugly head again in his second marriage. Deja vu much? For those keeping score at home, that's 2 marriages with accusations of abuse. So, while the legal system let him off the hook with a plea deal, a lot of people still think Raven's actions in history were screaming guilty. Think about it. The infidelity, the relationship with a minor, AWE, the emotional abuse, the unpredictable outbursts, the life insurance cash grab. It's like a checklist of red flags. Add to that his attempts to dodge responsibility and rewrite history, and you've got a recipe for suspicion that even the best defense lawyer can't fully scrub away. Yet, here we are. Raven Abaroa is living as a free man today, while Janet's family is left mourning and questioning whether justice was truly served. It's a brutal reminder that circumstantial evidence, no matter how damning it feels, doesn't always lead to a conviction. So here's the million-dollar question for you. Do you think Raven was guilty? Was justice served? Or did the legal system let him off too easy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this case still has people debating to this day.